All right, so where we left off, we had our MP, or rather our SP bar. We'd done some stuff to get our active skills set up, and we'd started, so our active skills are set up in the player's quote-unquote inventory. We have a mechanism for equipping skills, even though we don't have a screen in front of it. And we left off with this temporary bit of code that is executing two different skills that are used. And I mentioned in the last part that I feel like moving towards something that's like a command-based system in order to execute actions that require a QTE is appropriate. And I mean, since I started off with having the player attack, and the player class has the guard QTE as well. And I'll just go ahead and show that again real quick for anyone that maybe doesn't know immediately what I'm talking about or hasn't been watching the rest of the series. I've got this attack QTE, this slider, that denotes normal or critical attacks or misses. And that ring that comes down denotes guard opportunity. So if I press B while the rings are aligned, it acts as a guard and takes off a certain % of damage. If I miss that or let time run out, the ring misses, it just counts as a normal hit. There's no damage reduction. With this slider, yellow is, I know it went by a little quickly, yellow is a normal attack, green is a critical attack, and red is a miss. So I press A once to start the attack, and then I press A again when the dot is over the part of the slider I want to hit. And those are currently in my player class. I have that set up as part of a coroutine that shows this QTE, and everything dealing with the QuickTime event, or QTE for short, is in here in this class. And I'd kind of always intended to move this out and make this more of a reusable construct. But just hadn't quite gone around to it, and now I'm going to need to as part of my skill system, because I'm going to have skills that use QTEs to determine the efficiency, but I'm also going to probably have multiple skills that utilize the same type of QTE. So, for instance, that attack slider, or something similar to it, that could be used for a few different attack type QTEs. It doesn't just have to be exclusively for a normal attack. But, so I don't quite want to move these out yet, because this is kind of ingrained into my attack system. I'm going to start off with building a system for my skills that I can then port my normal attack and my guard QTE over into. So to start with, my QTE items are at least a little separated. So I've got a guard QTE class that handles the construction and update checking for the guard action, and a target slider QTE, which is what I called my attack QTE. Target slider kind of meaning they're targets or target or targets that we're trying to hit, and it's sliding across. And I did handle for a few things like does the slider start from the right or from the left? Does it travel across the screen and then back again and keep going until the player interacts? Or does it simply, as the normal attack is now, you have to hit it before it reaches the right side, otherwise it doesn't count. A lot of commented out code in here. If you've been looking at the code I've been writing at all, you probably figured out that's a habit of mine, is leaving code that's old in here commented out in case I come back and need it for some reason. It's kind of a bad habit, but it's also helped me out a few times. So I've got my QT, and right now as far as my scene goes, I just pop this in here. So I've got my prefabs with my, or rather, these ones aren't going to count because they're overworld enemies. I've got my instantiated prefab instances that for my enemies, and each enemy has the guard QTE comes from a pool of items, of pre-instantiated items that are then parented to the enemy and activated and reinitialized every time a chance of guarding comes up. And that's kind of the correct approach to this, because I don't want to be creating and destroying a lot of game objects that'll unnecessarily thrash the CPU. Object pooling is kind of a pretty standard approach towards memory management and object management in games. And for those of you who don't know what object pooling is, the general idea is that I have a certain number of X items created. So I also have like my rabbit models here are pre-created at the beginning of my scene. And then as they are needed, they are kind of taken and moved and made visible. And then when they're no longer needed, they are deactivated and turned off and put back into the pool. So the only thing I'm really, instead of allocating a new model, I'm just changing the position and making it visible. The same with my guard QTE. And that's the approach I should take with my attack as well, except I never came back and fixed this. I have my attack QTE as part of the enemy model. Which, without the initialization being done, is just empty, no space type of thing. But it is there. And this should really get pulled and attached to the canvas. The position is center 000, but you could define some custom repositioning or whatever to make it look good. I don't know why the editor's not letting me do that, but you'll have to take my word for it that that element is actually the QTE. So I would want to move that into a pooling system and have that get parented and positioned appropriately. But we'll do that a little bit later. For right now, I want so I also have some prefabricated instances that will be perfect for that. Where would that be? Yeah, battle. I have attack QTE and guard prompt QTE. Which these are, the code actually generates the size and position of everything, so that's why these aren't showing up. So what do I want to do? Well, first off, at the core of any of these QTEs, so to start with, I think I'm going to make bash use my normal attack QTE, and then afterwards, after I have the infrastructure in place, I'm going to go ahead and create a new QTE to use for the actual bash skill. And I'm not going to use the attack QTE for both, but I'm going to use the attack QTE to set things up first, since I already have the prefab and everything created. And it's so first off, I'm going to go ahead and make a object pool for my guard QTE. So I'm going to duplicate my guard pool. Actually, I'm going to rename that while I'm in here. And I'm going to put my attack QTE in here. Starting capacity is 5. I mean, quite frankly, I can only attack one thing at a time. So 1 is my starting capacity. My maximum capacity, I can't imagine a scenario where I would need to increase it, but sure. I mean, that's not going to hurt anything because I should never hit that piece of code that triggers my capacity increase. And if you want to look at the code here, so I've got my object pool manager class that deals with, has my item management values and my prefab that I'm creating. And it deals with some runtime things, cleaning up the pool, changing what prefab the pool is using, though that's not really a scenario I would come across. It has this game object pool object, which is another one of mine. It keeps track of it has a couple events to notify when a new object was created or destroyed, a list of game objects that have been created, the parent transform, which is going to be essentially just going to be this pool game object that I was editing earlier, and the size of the pool, which is passed in by the object pool manager. If you notice, this isn't a mono behavior, so this isn't a component attached to a game object, but the pool manager is. And this guy essentially just comes in here. He says, okay, well, I have a prefab. I know what the size of my pool is initially, so I'm going to create those objects using, a simple game object dot instantiate, sets its parent to the current object, drops the position, deactivates the object so it's inactive in the scene, and notifies whoever might be paying attention to any object pools, or this object pool, that an object was created. And whenever I need to get an instance of an item, I just call pool.getAvailableItem, and it returns the game object, the first game object that is not active underneath the pool. And if it doesn't find one of those, and it's allowed to increase the capacity based on the properties we set in the editor, it creates a new one and adds it to the pool and returns that new instance. And then whenever we need to return an object to the pool, we just call return to pool, give it the game object of the prefab, or of the instance of the prefab, and it resets the parent in position and deactivates the object. And it's now available for the next time somebody calls getAvailableItem. So, moving on. Yeah, so I've got my attack QTE pool, and I've got this object pool dictionary, which is a item in my IOC container that lets me look up object pools by a string key. So I need to add a fourth one of these here, because now I have a attack QTE pool, and I'm going to give him this guy, which is looking for the object pool manager instance on that game object. Now, as far as my association on this goes, let's go ahead and I'm going to have the active skill object know which QTE it needs. I think that's the appropriate place to store that at the moment. So it's going to have a QTE key. Skill repository. All right, just go ahead and have these both be the attack QTE. Now, I need a way to show and manage this thing aside from, yeah. I need to show this and have this accessible from someplace other than the player instance. So let's take another look at player. Oops. Player, where'd you go? There we are. All right. Yeah, so I went over this in a previous part, but the general idea is that it sets up the QTE object, enables it. We wait until it's been dealt with, and then we track some state based on the result. So in this case, the only things we know out of the normal attack QTE is was an attack successful and was the attack critical. So in other words, did they hit either the orange or the red? And if they did, did they hit the yellow and green, sorry. And if they did, was it a green hit? So what do I need to know? I need to know well, first off, yeah, I got my QTE folder running around here somewhere. Battle QTE. Well, first off, I'm going to move this. I always try to make sure I do my folder management in Unity, because Unity generates the project file for Visual Studio. And I think it's pretty safe to do it in either one, but just in case, I'd rather, since Unity's the master of this, relationship here, I'd rather, deal with things in here. So I'm going to move where's my scripts? Scripts, battle, QTE. I'm going to bring this up a folder because I'm also going to have QTEs that aren't in battle. Yeah, it's going to reload. Yeah, collapse all. There we go. And just to be sure, yeah, this guy's fine with that. Okay. All right, so that worked out fine. So I'm going to have a QTE manager of some sort. And it's going to know, based on the key, which pool to go from. It needs to know, yeah. So I know this isn't going to show up in the recording, but I'm just keeping notes here. So I need to know the QTE key. I need to know the parent it's going to be a part of. And I need really the only thing I care about out of that is the result of the QTE. I don't necessarily care about actually executing the attack from that perspective. Or rather, executing the skill. It's not necessarily an attack. So yeah, I just need to know the result sets from that. But the results can vary, right? It's not always a Boolean true or false, was it successful, or anything else. Maybe it's a percentage, right? Maybe we're holding down a button and releasing at a certain point and not exceeding another. And if and how long we held that down without exceeding the limit indicates some kind of percentage or some other multiplier value or something like that. Or maybe it's a QTE to mash a button multiple times, and how many times we mashed in a certain time range is the value we want. So I need to have a custom result set from my execution of the QTE. but our QTE is always going to have the same invocation criteria. It always needs to be parented to something. It always needs to have the key to know which QTE to get from the pool. I suppose a QTE could also then have variable inputs that aren't just, for instance, the equipment values or things like that. So it would need a variable input as well. Yeah, so let's just start executing and see where we end up. Right? Not going to get anywhere just, fiddling our thumbs. So let's create a QTE. Oops, my cap lock's on. Parent. Okay, so we can get the object, set the parent up. But now the problem comes in when I need to know about this specific QTE. So these guys don't have any kind of shared base class thus far. But should I have a shared base class between these? So in the case of the attack, I have these very specific parameters. In the case of the guard is entirely based on randomized values. I hadn't gotten around to making any of my stats affected at all, though it was kind of in the plans. Depending on your shield or something, you might have a much larger width to the circles, so it's easier to actually hit the QTE. And also, as you can tell, this has some very specific position and rotation requirements that the other thing didn't have, because the guard QTE isn't a Unity UI item. It's a 3D construct. So it gets parented directly below the transform, whereas the attack QTE gets, well, the attack QTE doesn't get its parent changed in this case, but it's a child of the canvas rather than of the enemy itself. So I can use the same visual QTE for multiple things, but the context of the QTE might be different. For instance, maybe my attack QTE isn't for attacking, maybe it's simply a challenge of accuracy, and it's not being based off of the player's stats, it's being based off something else, or even being based off some randomized value. So what that tells me is I need all right, so let's do this. IQTE. Boy, that looks ugly. I should probably just start calling them QuickTime Event instead of QTE, but whatever. Yeah, so the problem with this approach is going to be that as a consumer, I'm always going to kind of need to know what the input parameters are, which kind of defeats the point of this level of abstraction in the first place, right? Like if they all had common input parameters, that would be fine. The reality is that's kind of overkill for what I'm doing, right? So well, I still want the interface though, actually. So, yeah. So what I want to do here is I want to have my interface, IQTE. It's going to take activate, So it's not the cleanest thing in the world. But, well, not quite done yet at any rate. It's not exactly a command repository either. I'm going to rename that in a little bit here. Yeah, a command pattern would have been a decent enough idea, except that thus far I have two QTEs and both of them have drastically different inputs and results and criteria under which they can be called, and it's more of a QTE manager than a well, it's not really a manager or a repository either, because it's not really storing the QTEs. Yeah. It's more of a funnel. Yeah, so let's give it a swing and see what happens. So where was I going to call this from? I was going to call this from here. The problem is I need to know then... I'm going to need to know about what the input and output of my QTEs are. So I can't really just call it dynamically by passing through some key value. Right? I have very specific things that I expect to happen as a result, and I have very specific criteria that I expect to pass in. So having that be generic doesn't really help me too much. So in this case, then my skill doesn't really even need to know about the QTE key, because, I mean, I'm always going to need to know when I'm calling it which QTE I'm using, so I know which inputs and outputs to use. So, what do I call this guy? Yeah, I just called him attack QTE. Attack QT. The parent. I'll go ahead and just leave it at this for now. So maybe this will work. Sorry, I was a little quiet there for a bit. But, so I'm going to show this QTE. This is not particularly efficient. Doing this transform.findChild. But I'll probably change this actually in a few minutes. I'll give enemy a property that is the QTE canvas. So I'll be able to grab that and parent objects to it and remove them from that, as I want. But for the moment, so I have a 0 critical width. There's no green section in the bar. The normal is going to be 30% of the bar, and they have to hit that in order to successfully use bash. Get input from pressed button is going to take the button I use to initiate the skill, so whichever button it was equipped to actually trigger the QTE. And this function that I'm passing in is going to be the criteria by which I check to see if I can actually engage the QTE. So previously in the normal attack code, I want to make sure that the player is looking at an enemy and that enemy they're looking at is the same enemy that they started the QTE with. Now, that's kind of what I'm doing here, the exact same thing. And I have a function I'm passing in that is what should occur on completion of the QTE, whether it was successful or not. So the result it's getting passed is that same result object I'm getting from that iQTE interface. And if it's successful, I'm going to continue doing the same exact thing, right? The section it hit doesn't matter aside from that it was successful. And I'm going to continue doing the 1.5 times damage. I ended up making my QTE command repository, which really this is QTE command factory. Though it's also not really a factory in the sense that I'm not creating QTE objects. But it's as applicable of a term as any. Yeah. So he parents the QTE, or rather the QTE takes in that target parent as well as the input information I'm passing in. It checks the can engage. So either there's no can engage function provided, so we're good to go, or a can engage function was provided, meaning that there are criteria to whether or not we should check the button input and actually engage the QTE. And the onComplete will then just take the results from the QTE usage, and afterwards we just return the QTE object to the pool, changing the parent back to the pool and deactivating the object. So, the hell, let's see what happens. Any errors? No errors. Why do I have these zeros everywhere? That was from a previous debug log statement. Should ditch that. So, let's go ahead and find ourselves a bunny. Come here, you. Bash. Bash did not show the QTE. Why not? Well, actually, let me pause that then. Well, first off, so I got my attack QTE pool, and it's got one attack QTE. And yeah, it just didn't go anywhere. So, So what's up? Player skill controller. I'm going to step through. See what happened. All right, hit my breakpoint. Oh. Because I'm not, Looks like my automatic window switching on my recording stopped working. So I'll have to remember to switch monitors manually. But I forgot to run this as a coroutine, even though I very specifically made a comment right here, execute from a coroutine. So that'll happen. Which, being able to execute this from a coroutine was the reason I made this not this guy a mono behavior, but the reason I made the repository a mono behavior instead of a class on its own. So I just need to call that, yes. You need an extra one of these. Well, we got better. The variable critical area of target slider QTE has not been assigned. You probably need to assign the critical. Critical area not found. Oh no. You know, I bet I made changes to this under the enemy and never reapplied that back to the original QTE. Combat enemy. Canvas pivot. Attack QTE. Yep, that's different than the one I had before. So, that's fine. We will go ahead and take my attack QTE and we'll replace it with this one. All right, let's try that again. No error. Well, my QTE is moving at least. What is going on here then? So, where's my battle arena? I do that to the first enemy. Because the... I see. Of course. I don't understand. Could it not find the parent? Target enemy, transform, find child, canvas. Is this thing actually called canvas? I thought it was. Canvas. Sorry. I gotta remember to switch that manually. Yes, this guy's just chilling out here. So let's take another look in here. Yeah, so it didn't find the parent. Maybe find child only looks at immediate children. But either way, I noticed that this guy, where's my prefab? Attack QTE. I noticed he's getting instantiated at some weird positions. And also, that is coming from there. Damn you. Alright. Reset your position. That's why he's getting some weird positions on him. Alright. So debugging, the parent is still null. So what the heck? Well, I guess we're making that change to enemy a little sooner than I thought we were. So, I need a private transform canvas. Wait a minute. Am I already exposing the same information? UI Manager. And what's UI Manager attached to? Where's Yeah, I already have the enemy UI Manager. It's on the canvas. So, yeah. So forget that noise. That should be okay. Well, there was a QTE. It was way out there. Let's give this guy a pause and take a look at him. Oh boy. Oh boy. Yeah, that's something, all right. What the hell's happening here? Yeah, you're in attack QTE, all right. Your position is bananas. Your scale's 100. So if I go 1, 1, 1, or is everything? No, those look fine. Rotation's bananas as well. Okay, so, well, I've seen this before. All right, there's, I've seen this before when you're transferring parented objects from one another. The transformation can get a little wonky. So as part of this activate, after I set the parent, I'm going to say this dot transform local position is equal to 0. This dot transform dot. Yeah, 1. I thought that was a 1. So let's see how that does. There we go. Yep, and other buttons do not work. Normal attack. Sweet. All right, so there's our QTE creation system. It's not quite how I thought it was going to be when I started out, but maybe in the next part we'll make some more changes. All right, have a nice day.